Welcome to Thinkin, a podcast series by Kautilya School of Public Policy.
Hello and welcome. I am Prashant Rathore.
I am Therese Thomas and welcome to Thinkin, the podcast club of Kautilya School of Public Policy. Today we have a very special guest, Professor Steve Jarding with us. Professor Steve Jarding is an educator, a communication expert and an international consultant. Through his 40 years of career, Professor Jarding has advised prime ministers, presidents, members of parliament, members of Congress, mayors and many other on communication, political campaign and message strategy in around 40 countries around the world. In addition, Professor Jarding has been acting as a campaign manager to many of the political candidates in Bangladesh, India, Ukraine, Brazil and many other countries. A very welcome to you, Professor Jarding. We are so delighted to have you here.
Wow, the pleasure's all mine. I assure you. Thank you. It'll be fun.
Yeah. So, Professor, let's start.
Okay.
You have been in the space for last 40 years. You've been working with politicians and all. So, basically my first question is, what is political consultancy? Is it PR of a politician? Is it about only data or a strategy making? What is it actually?
Well, consultancy can take a whole variety of forms. It can be very specialized, media consultancy, polling, where you do research, or there can be general consultants, a whole lot. In my work, I tend to be a general consultant where I do the oversight of a complete campaign. Very often I'll write a campaign plan for a country that I'm in, for a race that I'm doing. But for me, that consultancy is a partnership. Too many American consultants, I believe, think that the arrogance of America, they can come into a country and say, well, we know how to do this. Well, they can't. I can't come to India when I've done work in India. I didn't come and say, I know all the answers in India. I don't. I need help with culture, language, history, law. So very often in my consultancy, and I think a good consultancy would say you're going to, particularly when you're not from the country, as I'm not here, obviously. So I would come in and partner with people on the ground who knew all the things I just talked about, from culture to history and law. And then together, we would put together a plan to win. And the plan is critical. Most campaigns, from my experience, don't have a plan. It's a little bit of seat of the pants. Okay, what's going on today? It just is. And so, oh, well, this happened and we'll react. I want to, in my campaigns, control everything that I can control. Because so often in campaigns, things pop up you can't. And it's just kind of spur of the moment. You have to react. So if I can put together a plan that deals with all the things from scheduling to research, how to handle disinformation, how to budget, how to do voter contact, voter persuasion, voter turnout. If I can get all of those essentially planned out, then I can let the campaign come to me, and I think my response in that campaign will be better. But it starts with a good foundation on the ground, and then the consultancy can be specialized, or it can be broader, such as what I normally do.
So, as you said, Professor, I would like to ask this question as an individual. I'm interested in political consultancy. But tomorrow, if let's say I'll be a consultant and I'll get an opportunity with a party where my ideology doesn't align with that party or the candidate. So what should I do that time? Should I take that opportunity? Or should I?
Well, it's a great question. It happens more than you think, where someone will come. I get offers a lot. I've had offers in India just in the few weeks I've been here. I've had several different parties reach out to me. For me, party ideology is important. I mean, either you kind of believe what you believe, you don't. But very often political parties have a lot more in common than we think. They can be very different. But to me, as much as anything, if it's a candidate, what is her perception of public service? Where do they want to move India? What's their rationale? Do they understand that service isn't about them as a candidate or an elected official? It's about the people they're supposed to serve. So a lot of it starts with that. If they come to the table with a perspective of what service in a representative democracy means, and that literally means I have to serve the public that put me here. That's the mission, that's the definition. So it starts with that. And then if the party is dramatically different in their value system or their approach than what I would take, that may be a neutralize. That may say I can't do it because I don't necessarily believe in their ideals. But I really do believe in the power of personality and the power of an individual's understanding of service. That when you have that, you can transcend a lot of of politics. And I tell my students a lot and candidates, and I don't want people to take this wrong, but parties at some level, and they have cachet, they have relevance, but they're the vehicle that gets you across the finish line to give you title. And when you have title, it's on you to govern. The party isn't governing now, you are. And they may have influence, they're part of who you are, but you are now in the seat with title. What are you going to do to better your country or state or whatever it is? So in that sense, I certainly have worked with parties. I have no problem doing that. I've worked with individuals. I like working with individuals because that's the person that's going to have the title. But I've done both, and you can make both work. There are certain parties I wouldn't work for if they're too extreme or they're too out there, or their methods for power are just frankly not good. Well, then no, I wouldn't do that. You don't always know. And when you go into a country, I went into Ukraine and had a candidate that wanted to talk to me. I knew nothing about him. And it turned out he was this awful human being. He had stolen money from the government, and it was like, and I didn't know that going in. I just wasn't familiar. I wasn't. He was actually from Moldova, but I was training in Ukraine. And so when I met with him, he seemed like a nice guy, and I checked him out, and I went, "Oh my God, I can't work for this guy." So it happens. But and that's just the international flavor, and it goes back to my point. As an international consultant, I don't know the nuances of a country. I need to. By the way, if this had been different, and he turned out to be a terrific guy, and I really liked him, and his goals were right, then I have the time to say, okay, I can check them out a little bit. I can start to look for partnerships in the ground. But that's the way I do it. The bigger point, I think, for consultancy in India, it is wide open. India is so, as it moves in to take its rightful place on the world stage, is one of I think the top 4 leading nations on earth that's going to help dictate policy this century. The need for professional consultancy, I think, is very great. And I think that void will be filled with people from Kautilya, people that get training in public service that understand that we need professional politics, because that will attract better people to the political arena, and it will elect better people to serve the public in India.
That was a very insightful answer. I mean, going a little more further to it, India is a multicultural society, and the reflection of different identities can be seen in the day-to-day politics here. When the identity politics is so deep-rooted in the Indian psyche, do you think political consultancy on the lines of development is tricky here?
Well, it's kind of tricky everywhere, because you tend to get, even in the United States, where it's a constant campaign and there's way too much money and all that, the United States is it's a big place, and so the South is very different than the Northeast, for instance, or the West. The Midwest is different from the South and from the coast. So you get that there too. India is different. You have caste. You have a huge country. You have the cultural, and the history is so much more deep and diverse and long here than it is, for instance, in the United States. So you always have to take that into consideration. But it goes back to my point. If I came in and said to you, "Oh, I want to do your campaign for prime minister, or at least for your party, as you get into these races," and I know how to do it, you don't. You just, not as an international consultant. I can say, I know I can bring you value add. I know that I can do things that aren't being done in India that will absolutely help you get elected. But I have to have a partnership with you and your team on the ground. So yeah, the opportunity, I think, in India is absolutely wide open. We need talented young people. Hopefully part of what we're teaching here at Kautilya, it will give those foundational opportunities, in my case through communication or campaign management or messaging. But there's a whole lot of other things that you need, budgeting and all these things you need to bring to the table. I think you can get them at a place like Kautilya, at a school of public policy, which is why I'm so excited, not only for me to be here, but the fact that the schools here and the response from the students has been so fantastic.
You have put it in a very wonderful manner. To mix things a bit, let's play some few videos. We have some very interesting questions from outside.
Okay.
Since you're the Ustad, which means the master of political consultancy.
Let's see what my answers are first.
We have some questions from public policy students, one MLA. So let's get right into
okay.
it.
Okay, and they're up here.
Yeah.
All right.
Namaste, my name is Shweta Mahale Political, and I am the member of Legislative Assembly from Maharashtra. Professor, my question to you is democracy is about freedom and equality, and to maintain this harmony, we have a system called the election. But the elected people from this system are not equal and free. The gender gap is huge. Professor, what do you think about this? And how can we increase the ratio of women in Indian politics? Thank you.
Well, it's a great question. We're getting the feedback here. You don't want to hear me twice. No, it's a great question. I mean, when you look at, and it's not just India, certainly it's worldwide, but when you look at the Indian parliament, 15% of the representatives are women, 51% of the population is women. There are increasing studies that suggest if women had their rightful percentage, you'd have vastly different policy and arguably much better policy in many, many areas. So it's not only there's an underrepresentation, but you can make a case that once we keep elevating, and by the way, in India, numbers are coming up as they are in most countries. So it's getting better, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be. The question one that I think is critical is, okay, so how do you change that? Well, I think the first thing is that you have to empower young women to say, we can do this. That yes, there may be cultural barriers, there may be historical barriers, there may be logistical barriers with how our government is structured that somehow hinder in a variety of ways women's participation. But you have to put yourself forth. You have to empower women. You have to, and I think you have to do it all over the country. You have to go into villages and say, don't take this anymore. Your voice is so powerful. One of the things that I have found in my career in politics is politicians tend to move most aggressively and most quickly when they hear voices. And when they don't hear voices, they assume there's no pressure. And often the only voices they hear are the voices they've heard forever. The same pressure groups, the same, in this case, maybe male-dominated. If the collective voice of women in India rose up and said, we need to take our rightful place, we need to increase our numbers, as they're doing, but not where it should be. That is one, what you do is make that voice heard. Two, you want to train next generation women. Train next generation women to say the stereotypes that are out there, they do not need to be barriers to you. You can knock those down. We have increasing amounts of research. We teach it in the class that I'm teaching here, that there are tools now that women can use and an understanding for how to treat sexism when it's fostered upon you. Instead of saying, oh, I don't know what to deal with it, so I'm not going to even put myself out there. Say, I know how to deal with it, and I'm going to stop it. I'm going to beat it down so that I can move forward. Those tools now exist that didn't. There's plenty of role models in India politics. God knows your history much more than, say, the United States, where women haven't had the elective, certainly not to the national leadership that you've had in India. So there's precedent here for, I think, those doors to kick further open. But it has to be, I think, that women collectively demand that their political leaders listen to them and take them seriously. And indeed, women need to put candidates forth and demand that parties put them up for office and that they take their rightful place. If the voice isn't loud enough, it won't be heard. And I know that sounds simplistic, but it really isn't. I mean, it's hard to do. I've done movement politics around the world. Movements are difficult, but boy, when they take off, when you get to collective power that women have in India. I mean, the numbers suggest it. You can move it, but you have to be focused. Say, we're gonna bring our voice together, and we are going to train next generation women leaders to take their rightful place. That combination, I think, can elevate this percentage that we're seeing very slowly but assuredly rising. I think we can elevate that dramatically. And in the era with social media, where you can use these platforms to engage women and connect to women across the country, it's much easier today than it was when I got into politics 40 years ago. So
I just hope whatever you said comes true.
okay, I do too. So.
We'll go to the next question.
Hello Stu, my name is Harshal. I am currently doing my Masters in Public Policy at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Hyderabad. So my question is that for the students who belong to the public policy background and wanted to do their career in political consultancy, what are the things they need to work on, and what impact can they make if the students who belong to the public policy background choose the political consultancy as their career? Thanks.
Well, I think with any consultancy, the foundation is, and by the way, this doesn't always happen, but the foundation is you have to put yourself in a position to be good at what you do. A lot of times I get it where young people will work in a campaign, or they do some work for a party, or they do some work for a consultancy group, and they do that for a year or two and go, I'm now the expert. No, you're not. All right. It amazes me how many consultancies are made up of people who have never really run campaigns, for instance, and then they put themselves out as campaign experts, or media firms that bring people in who have never really run the media in a campaign, but they were hired and they worked through the firm and now call themselves experts. I am totally biased because my career I spent on the ground. I spent in the trenches. When I go into countries, and I've done work in 50 countries, I go on the ground and I say, I'm going to get my hands dirty. I need to know what's going on and all the things that I talked about, from culture to law to whatever, on top of what I bring to the table from my expertise in different forms of campaign management. But I do it because it's all about winning. And so my best advice to a young consultant would be get good at what you want to consult on. Take the courses. At Cotillia, you can take from campaign management to communication to, how do you broaden yourself so that you can have that expertise, and then get some experience, get in the ground, try different things in campaigns. You don't have to do that for 30 years to become an expert, but you should do some of it. Don't just do one campaign as an intern in the campaign and then hang your shingle and say, now I'm a campaign manager or a consultant. You're not. And the danger if you do that is you probably won't be all that successful, but you also kind of tarnish the profession, right? Where people say, we tried to hire these folks, they didn't know what they were doing. You will do better if you take the time to get some experience and to listen and to learn as you're observing in a campaign. In my own experience, I was very fortunate. My first job in a campaign was a driver for the candidate. It was a great job because I was with the candidate and everything happened through the candidate. So I saw how, in this case it was a man, how he was scheduled. I saw, what the pressures were. I met all the donors and all the political bigwigs that he met, and it was really an eye-opener. Then I went and I did field work where I did voter work in the next campaign. Learned a lot. How do you interact with voters? And then I had an assistant management position where I oversaw campaigns, and pretty soon I was a campaign manager after only a few years, but at least I had 3 or 4 campaigns, not just one where I interned and then said I know what I'm doing. If campaigns are about winning, okay, they just are. And too many consultants, from my perspective, think it's about I can make some cash. I learned a long time ago, I grew up poor, okay, didn't have any money, and I chose campaign management as a profession, and I realized if you don't win, nobody will hire you. If you can't lose 5 in a row and say, hire me. And so I say that somewhat facetiously, but part of it for me was selfish. You got to win. It's a tough business, and if you don't win, you don't have title, and if you don't have title, you cannot affect change. And I believe my value system, what I believe in, what I think I want out of elected officials matters, because I think we'll have a better society. So yes, selfishly I wanted to win, but I wanted to win for what I believed in, what I thought the candidates brought to the table. And so I put together a campaign plan, which most managers really don't, because we're going to win. That's my goal. You don't win them all, but I've been fortunate enough to win most of them. And and that's how you affect change. You have to have title. So the best advice to a consultant is, don't just do it for the wrong reason. Too often it's like, well, I'm working with elected officials, that's so cool, and I can make some money. No, it's about to win. It's about affecting change. You have to, I think, have that perspective to be a good consultant, and you have to understand know what you know and know what you don't know. And what you don't know, you need to fill that in and fill those gaps to be a better consultant. Too often we don't do that enough. We don't, in effect, apprentice enough to learn the game. And my recommendation would be both through academic institutions like Cotillia, but also on-ground learning is the best thing you can do. As I said, when I came to India and first did campaigns, I knew what I didn't know, and when I was offered jobs, it would be only if you can give me a team that knows what they're doing, that can give value add to me, so that I can give value add to you. And when that happened, you have a pretty good team and I think a solid campaign plan. If that wouldn't happen, you can't take it. You can't put yourself out as somebody that you're not. And that would be my best advice to a consultant. Because once you get your foot in the ground and you're good at it, you can get really good at it because there's such demand. It's a wide open profession, and I encourage it for young people. We need it in India. We need it worldwide. But because of the power that I think India has as a burgeoning absolute leader in the 21st century, India needs to modernize its campaigns as well.
Oh.
That's brilliant, Professor. We'll go to the third video.
Hello Steve, I am Ajinkya from Maharashtra. I am a development practitioner turned into a political consultant. I have a couple of questions to ask to you. First one being, because you have worked in different countries with different leaders, different parties, so what are the major differences you have spotted in Indian politics and in the other geographical regions? Adding on to that, we don't have debate culture as such. So as a political consultant or as an individual who wants to initiate that debate culture in India, what are the ways we can initiate that platform? Second question is, before choosing a leader or a party to work with, what are your tick marks, as in what do you look out in your client or the party? And once you decide the client or party, what are the 5 to 10 pointers where you start?
Okay. Well, first of all, there are a variety of questions there. They're all important. The first question is how different or what are differences in India. They're really not that different from a lot of places. There's differences, but there are differences that I see in other parts of the world. So I don't know that there's any one unique thing that, oh, well, India does this and I've never seen that before. It is different in the sense that it's very large. It's different in the sense that its culture is very diverse. It's different in the sense that its history is very long. And so you have to understand those nuances. Not every place has that. Some do, but not every place does. And it goes back to what I said. If I came in here and said, hire me, I can do your campaign, and I didn't respect that, I would be in a really bad spot, and I would not be serving my candidate or the party that I'm working for. So those types of things need to come into play. Now, having said that, I also believe, though, sometimes you have to come into a place and change the culture. You have to come in and say, well, I know you've been doing this, but it doesn't mean you couldn't do this, and that would work here. Because I get it a lot where people say, well, we don't do that in India, or we don't do that in Bangladesh, or we don't do that in Brazil. Yeah, I know you don't do it, but you can do it. It's certainly legal in most places to do a lot of different techniques, but historically or culturally you haven't done them. If you do them, you can be better. So that's normally where I would come to the table and say that's how you have to approach a campaign. As far as debates, I'm always intrigued when I come in, particularly in parliamentary systems where people say, well, we don't really have our leaders. If I'm the opposition, I am calling for debates all day long, particularly if the leader looks like maybe they're ahead or a little bit. And if they say, well, but we don't know that I'll be the prime minister. Yeah, we kind of know. Okay, so I want you to debate me. And you can get, from candidates to organizations to news outlets to say, let's have a debate. Let's discuss the issues and try to put pressure. And I would do that. I mean, and I do it because I think it's the right thing to do, right? I mean, too often political campaigns have become just kind of media juggernauts where you put ads up or you campaigns and candidates, parties, they go to the people with their own kind of skewed message. Obviously it's biased toward themselves, and call that a discussion of the issues, and it's not. And oftentimes, and you see it in India, where media tends to, at least large segments of it, tend to be more aligned, if you will, with the party, that they're going to be biased toward that party. So you're not necessarily getting the dialogue that you certainly could otherwise get in a debate. So if I were good government organizations, I'd say I want debates. If I were, certainly educational institutions, I'd say we need to debate. Well, let's have this dialogue. And certainly if I were opposition parties, I would say, and again, I'm being selfish, I have nothing to lose because I'm in the opposition very often, I have less power, but let's debate the issues. So I know that culture isn't here yet. I hope that it comes here. I think debates are very healthy. You're starting to see debates come more to the fore, even in parliamentary societies. But so that second. The third question, with regard to when you hire on, are there certain points? I'll go back to what I said earlier. I start with, do I believe your value system? Or do you understand that service isn't about you or your party or your ideology? It's about how you're going to serve the public. That's the most critical one. And then after that, it can be, what's your structure like? How much are you going to let me give value add? Do you have a team that will understand that if we work together, we can be better? Because again, part of that is being an international consultant. There's a tendency, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, where people will say, well, I'm skeptical, or this guy might make me look bad because I'm not doing what he says, and so there's a resistance to it. I don't come to the table with that because I'm old enough and have done enough campaigns where I say it's all about winning. I mean, that's what politics is. If you don't win, you don't have title. If you don't have title, you can't affect change. So I want to win. I don't want to come in and certainly steal anybody's thunder. For me, this isn't about, I want credit that we won. I just want to win. If I'm working for a candidate I believe in and his or her value system, I want them to win because I think they'll affect change in a better way. So that culture is still out there. That there's kind of who are consultants? How do we work with them? How are they value add? If we can get there, I think, and we will in India. I mean, India is too powerful. There's too much importance in what happens here to the world and certainly to India. And India's culture of, this is kind of, we love this, independence. We love this freedom to kind of control our own destiny. I think it's naturally going to rise to the fore.
So let's go to last segment. So Professor, you have worked in more than 15 countries, so you know so many leaders. So here we'll show you a photo,
okay,
and based on that you can share your experience.
And everyone else will see the photo?
Yeah, everyone. During the we'll do that.
Right.
If you can quickly say things you
It's
love about them,
okay,
or their domain of expertise.
Well, the first photo is Donald Trump. I don't love this man. Set his politics aside, if this is the best America has, you got to look in the mirror. This is a flawed human being. The Washington Post has documented in their research that he's a pathological liar. I mean, sorry, this is horrible to say, but that's what you find. I mean, when I see him, I apologize to the world. America's better than this. I do not like this man.
Perfect. Go to the next one.
Mr. Gandhi, I like him a lot. I had a chance to meet him and talk with him. I just bluntly and honestly, I believe he has unbelievable goodwill for India. I think he loves his country. He knows his place in it. He knows, obviously, history and culture from his own family perspective. I think he could be a great leader. I think, like any political figure, I believe the party has to rise to the occasion. He has to allow it to rise to the occasion. He and the party, because they're the out party to the BJP and to Mr. Modi, they have to have a sense of urgency. I think they have to start early. I believe Mr. Modi is already in full election mode because Mr. Modi is a very smart man. I did a chapter on political communication in 2017 and looked at who were the great political communicators worldwide, literally looked at everybody. Mr. Modi was number one. in how he used social media platforms, how he used mainstream platforms. He's very good. And if you're going to beat him, if you're going to make a case against him, you got to start early and you got to work it very, very early. So I like Mr. Gandhi a lot personally. I found him very engaging, very personable. But I think his party and the people around him, including ultimately Mr. Modi, has to have a sense of urgency that if we're going to win, we got work to do, because Mr. Modi is very powerful.
Any recommendation for Rahul Gandhi?
Any
recommendation from?
Oh well, I saw a speech the other day. I thought it was very, very powerful. Yeah, it was yesterday, I think. No, if he can bring that passion to the table, I think he's got to make a case to the people of India that he can take this nation further in a stronger direction, in a more open direction, in a more value-add direction than Mr. Modi. If he can do that, I think, and we talk in the class about messaging, I think there's always a message to win. Mr. Modi has a message right now that I would argue he's winning on. I think there's a message to beat that. There's always a message. But Congress or whomever the alternatives are, they have to find that message and articulate it and put cachet behind it to convince voters. In political messaging, you never want to play on your opponent's turf. Their turf is their message. I would argue today, Congress and the out parties, from my observation in India, are playing on Mr. Modi's turf. If they continue to do that, they'll lose. If they can establish your own turf and get people to play on their turf, the odds they win increase dramatically and become much better.
Mr. Gandhi will watch this video and listen to you.
Well,
We'll go to the next one.
Akhilesh, my friend. I like Akhilesh. I like him a lot. I worked with him more than I worked with any political figure in India. I actually moved to Lucknow for, I don't know, it was a couple months or something, and worked in a campaign. The campaign was very unique in the sense that there were family issues and things that didn't evolve the way a campaign, at least theoretically, would otherwise. But to me, that didn't say that somehow that was a fault or that was a problem with Akhilesh Yadav. I believe Akhilesh, I always have. I think he has all the skills to be a prime minister. I think he has all the skills to be a great leader. I believe that he is a terrific communicator. In my private conversations with him, he always, as chief minister, seemed to have the best interests of his state at heart. He was proud of things that he had accomplished, but he was hungry to accomplish more for his state. That's my background with Akhilesh. So I've always been high on him. I've spent, again, more time with him than any Indian politician. I know politics is different, and there's a lot of variables that enter into it. But it's a personal belief. I just liked him. I think he's got charisma. I liked his vision. I liked his understanding of what public service and what his role was. So, but that was my experience. So we'll see where it goes.
Because of the time crunch, we will have to end this interview
Okay.
here. But it was an absolute delight, Professor, to
Really.
have you here. Your idea of how communication should be, I mean, we have seen this, we have in our classes also, we have literally broken down videos and studied how communication should be and how it could be improved.
Right.
I mean, it was brilliant having you here.
Well, the pleasure was all mine, I assure you.
Literally, you are a magnificent professor and communicator. Thank you,
The
Professor.
pleasure was mine.
Thank you,
And thank you
Professor.
as well.
Thanks.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
All right, take care.
Thank you.